Welcome back to another edition of Versus, the show where we pit bodybuilder versus bodybuilder. Today's virtual pose down will be between reigning 212 Olympia champ Flex Lewis and Lee Priest, the Man of Steel himself. And we start today's show by doing this comparison and setting it up because in the FIBO in Germany, which is a big trade show they have every year out in Cologne, Germany, Lee Priest was out there with his company and Flex Lewis was out there, and they were actually met up in the gym and they started training together. And the age-old question always was, if Lee Priest was at his best and Flex Lewis was at his best, who would win? A lot of people think Lee, a lot of people think Flex, and they're from slightly different eras. And I don't know if Lee will ever make a comeback. He kind of hinted at it on the Iron Rage show, but we don't really know for sure. But I figured it would be cool to get pictures of Lee at his best, or the best pictures we can find, and Flex at his best, and compare them, and I'll give you my opinion, and you guys can let me know if you agree or disagree. So let's get to it. Let's go through the compulsory poses. Front double bicep. Lee Priest, one of his best poses, because he's got maybe the best set of arms in bodybuilding history. I don't think anyone can question whether on a small guy he has the best arms, because he certainly has some of the freakiest sized arms and shape of anyone I've ever seen, especially a guy for his height. Always had the great abs, good leg separation from the front. Flex Lewis is probably one of the most conditioned 212 bodybuilders of all time. Obviously got the great calves. I like Lee Priest on this pose from the front double bicep, even though I think Flex has a smaller waist. I like Lee on this pose because of the arms. Let's go to the front lat spread now. Now, Lee, obviously, with the tremendous delts, pecs, arms on this pose, good lats from the front, big flary, sweepy quads. Flex Lewis, not a great pose for him, not his most dominant pose for sure. I think that Lee probably sneaks by on this pose as well, just because of his sheer size and density and thickness on this pose. Whereas Flex, doesn't look quite as hard, although Flex is, once again, the front legs are always superior. He's always got the great ab definition. This is not the best shot I've ever seen from Flex doing this pose, but I'm going to give Lee Priest this pose as well. Now we go to the side chest pose, where, arguably, Lee Priest with those arms and those pecs, really freaky. But I think Flex Lewis on this shot has such great leg separation. And once again, this is a good pose for Flex right here. I've seen him positioned a little better in this pose, but I really like Flex on this shot because of the leg. Although Lee Priest, upper body wise, definitely has Flex beaten. You could almost call this a draw, but just because of sheer separation and conditioning on Flex's legs, I'm going to give Flex Lewis this pose. Let's go now to the back, where we get the back double bicep. This is where I think Flex Lewis, really, is very dominant here. Lee Priest, having more muscle than Flex from behind, but just not bringing that gnarly, crazy conditioning in the glutes, hamstrings, lower back. Lee always had trouble getting those areas in shape, although toward the end of his career, he was bringing it in a lot better. I'm going to give Flex Lewis the back double bicep. Let's go to the lat spread. Once again, because of Flex's crazy detail, he wins shows from behind. And this is where Lee always lost shows from. So I'm going to give this one to Flex Lewis again, the back lat spread, just because of the conditioning level. And I think he might have a slightly wider back than Lee. Side tricep pose. Now this is a pose, I don't like that. That's not one of the greatest Lee Priest side triceps poses. I couldn't find a better one than this anywhere, just because Lee hasn't competed for quite a while. Flex kind of hits this pose a little bit more twisted toward the front. Once again, that side leg, the leg detail is crazy on Flex Lewis on this pose. Lee has some pretty crazy triceps though when you see him in his front. But once again, I think that Flex can beat him only because of the level of conditioning that he shows on this pose. So I'm going to give it to Flex Lewis as well. Let's go to the front overhead abdominal shot. I always like Lee on this shot. I don't know why. He's just got a lot of detail. He's got really good abs. He's got the flary lats, and he's got those huge arms behind his head there. This is a freaky shot for Lee. I'm going to give Lee the overhead abdominal shot. And then we go to the last pose, which is the most muscular. Now, Flex is freaky on this shot because he's got a lot of dense, grainy muscle. But Lee Priest has got so much density and so much roundness and fullness in his arms, pecs, delts, traps, and front quads that this is just a freak shot. And I think that Lee Priest is freakier than Flex Lewis. I give this shot to Lee Priest. Now, when you think about it and you evaluate all the poses, we can go to another, this is the hands together one, and I think Lee still really shines here on this shot, just with too much arm mass and shoulder and pec. So, if you break it down pose by pose, it's a tie, 4 poses to 4 poses. So then you got to go to the tiebreaker, which is kind of symmetry. Who has better symmetry? You could make an argument for both of them. When they used to do the symmetry round where they would, do the quarter turns, Lee was amazing in that, and that was counted. So you have to now, if you give them a tie on the symmetry round, you have to say to yourself, who's got more wow? And that's really who the winner is here. Flex's wow comes from the fact that he's ridiculously conditioned, and I'm a conditioning buff. Lee's wow comes because he's got more cartoonish, round, crazy, freaky muscle. And so you can almost flip a coin between these two guys. They're so well matched up. Matter of fact, when Tyler, the creator, our producer, was putting the pictures together, he was confusing the two of them because they look alike a lot in a lot of shots, and they have very similar physiques. Being a guy from the 90s myself, I'd love to go with Lee Priest and say Lee Priest has got the win. But I never saw Lee bring the level of conditioning that Flex Lewis brought to the stage, and I think polish has a lot to do with who ultimately goes home with a one-on-one battle on stage. So to say, given what we've seen in the past of Lee and what we've seen in the past of Flex Lewis, I say Flex Lewis would win a one-on-one showdown. However, consider this. Lee Priest placed 7th at the '98 Olympia, which was the year Ronnie Coleman was at his best, as well as Flex Wheeler, Nasser El Somebody, Chris Cormier, Kevin Levrone. It was a stacked lineup. And somehow Lee managed to make that top 7. And that's something that Flex Lewis has never showed us. So, once again, when making these decisions, it's hard. But I'm a conditioning buff. Once again, I go with conditioning. I'm going to give Flex Lewis the nod on this one. Although I'd love to see Lee make a comeback and step on that Olympia stage next to Flex Lewis. I think it would sell the auditorium out for sure. Dave Palumbo with another edition of Versus. If you guys have any suggestions for who you'd like to see mano a mano, put up against each other, put them in the comments below, email me, and don't forget to hit subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our programming. I'm Dave Palumbo, and we'll see you next time.